Okay, section 1.1 is an overview of statistics. So it's just going to be a lot of definitions, kind of all the important words and terminology that we'll be using going forward. So to begin, we have the definitions for data and statistics. So data, as I'm sure we all know, is just information from certain observations or measurements. And statistics is the science of collecting, analyzing, organizing, and interpreting that data. So there's going to be two main types of data sets that we're going to be using. There's going to be population and sample. So for the definition of a population data set, it's going to be the collection of all outcomes of interest. So it's all outcomes of interest for whatever we are studying. And then a sample is going to be a subset. It's going to be a subset. So a subset essentially is just a part, and it's going to be a part of the population. So we're pretty much going to be using these terms over and over and over again. That's population and sample. So a sample should be representative of a population. So that's really, really important. And we'll kind of mention in a little bit how we actually managed to get these samples to be representative of a population. We do this using random sampling methods. Okay, so let's do a couple examples for identifying samples in populations. So for the first one, let's say we have a survey and 614 out of 1,000 business owners were asked whether they thought their company's Facebook presence was valuable. So we want to figure out the sample, and we want to figure out the population. So the sample here, we have 614 out of 1,000 business owners. The sample is going to be the 614 business owners because it's just the portion or the part or the subset. And the population is going to be the 1,000 business owners. So it's going to be all business owners of interest here. So that's 1,000. So it's not every business owner ever. It's just 1,000 business owners because that's the total or the entire portion of interest here. Okay, and then for the next one we have the age of 50 state senators is recorded. So we want the sample, we want the population. So the sample here is going to be the age. It's going to be the age of the 50 senators. And the population is going to be all outcomes of interest. So it's going to be all centers of interest. This is going to be the age of all the senators. And there are 100 state senators. Okay, and then for the last one seems a little bit easier here. It's going to be the number of pets in 5 households on a street of 10 households. So we want sample and population once again. And the sample is just going to be the number of pets. The number of pets in 5 households. And the population is going to be the number of pets in 10 households. Okay, so population is the entire collection of outcomes of interest, and the sample is just going to be a part or a subset of that population. Okay, so 2 more important terms that we'll be using. Parameter and statistic. So a parameter is going to be a numerical description. So that just means a number. So a numerical description of a population. And a statistic is going to be a numerical description of a sample. So parameter is just a number referring to a population. A statistic is a number referring to a sample. So these are actually pretty easy to remember. Parameter starts with a P. So does population. Statistic starts with an S. So does sample. So that's nice and convenient for us for remembering those. So let's do a couple examples here for determining which is which from some examples. So let's determine whether the numerical value in the question determines or describes a parameter or a statistic. So for the first one, we have a survey of 100,000 employers, and they reported that the national average salary is $53,000. So the number that we're referring to here, that we're trying to determine whether or not it's a parameter or a statistic, is 53,000. So we have to go up and think about what's that referring to. Is it referring to or is it describing a population, or is it describing a sample? Well, this is referring back to the 100,000 employers. So the 100,000 employers is a sample. That is not the entire, that's not every single employer. So since that's referring to a sample, that means $53,000 is a statistic. Okay, and then for the next one, we have the freshman class at a university has an average SAT math score of 514. So the number that we are looking at here is the 514. So this is referring back to the freshman class. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky. We have to determine whether or not the freshman class here is a sample or a population. So this is the entire freshman class. This is going to actually be a population. This is all outcomes of interest here. So it doesn't mention that we're interested in the entire SAT score for the whole entire university. We're just referring to the freshman class. It's the entire freshman class, so it is a population. So since that's a population, 514, the number 514 is a parameter. And for the last one here, for C, we have 50 bottles of water were randomly selected from a large collection of bottles in a company's warehouse. So the number that we're referring to is the 50. So we want to see if that's a parameter or a statistic. So this is collected from a large collection. So if it's from a large collection, that means the 50, that means the 50 here, let me scroll back down, has to be a sample. So that means 50 is a statistic here. So it is a statistic referring to a sample. Okay, and then for the next little couple definitions here for the last page, we have two main branches of statistics. We have descriptive statistics and we also have inferential statistics. So for descriptive statistics, this type of statistics involves organization. And display of data. So essentially descriptive statistics is the data itself. And for inferential statistics, this type of statistics is going to use a sample. So using a sample to draw conclusions about a population. So descriptive statistics is the data. Once again, kind of easy to remember. They both begin with D. Inferential statistics is how we can make inferences, which means how we can draw conclusions using a sample about the population. Okay, so let's do some examples for determining what part of the study represents descriptive and how we can draw conclusions based on the descriptive statistics. So for this first one, we have a large sample of men aged 48 was studied for 18 years, and it was found that for unmarried men, approximately 70% were alive at the age of 65, and for married men, 90% were alive at 65. So pretty morbid example here. So let's see what the descriptive statistics are, and then we'll also see what inferences can be made. So we'll find descriptive and inferential statistics. So for the descriptive, this is just the data. So we can actually just kind of repeat the data. So the data says that, I'm going to abbreviate a little bit, 70% unmarried men, 70% of unmarried men alive at 65. And then we also had that 90% of married men alive at 65. So it's just the data, just kind of repeating it. So now for the inferential statistics, we want to see what sort of inferences can be made from this. What conclusions can we draw based on the data? So some conclusions that maybe we can make from this is we don't want to jump to conclusions too much here. We just want to be pretty simple with our conclusions. So we can say that based on this data, being married for men is associated with a longer life. Okay, so something that we'll bring up again, I use the word associated. That's pretty important here. It correlates. Just because something correlates doesn't mean one caused the other one. Correlation or association does not imply causation. And then for the next one here, we have in a sample of Wall Street analysts, the percentage who incorrectly forecasted certain earnings was 44%. So descriptive, we want descriptive, and we want the inferential statistics. So once again, descriptive statistics is just going to be the data. So the data says that 44% of analysts were incorrect about the earnings. And for the inferential statistics, or the conclusions that we could draw, the inferential statistics, once again, we don't want to jump to too many conclusions here. We don't want to say 44% of analysts suck at their job or anything. We can probably say that the stock market is difficult to forecast. Because 44% being incorrect is pretty high. So we can say the stock market maybe is just difficult to forecast. Okay, and then for the last one here, we have a survey of 750 parents found that 31% support their kids financially until they graduate college, and 6% provide support until they start college. So descriptive and inferential once again. So for the descriptive statistics, it's just going to be the data. So the data says that 31% support the kids until they graduate. And the other portion was 6%. 6% support the kids until they start college. Oops. Okay, and then for the conclusions that we can draw, once again, we'll keep it pretty simple. For inferential statistics, we can just say that it looks like a higher percentage of parents support their kids until graduation. Okay, so a decent amount of definitions here, not too many though. So definition of data, definition of statistics, population, sample, parameter, statistic, descriptive statistics, and inferential statistics. So that is it for section 1.1.